Rozumu, os navir unkalni pachadug, bis tradicowa znajomstwa, bis min, bis wstupu, jaki nie schodzi na один za paperach, wdrazu kita udramu, ndrigu da vnutrishny rozpad. Co powinstu na was dara, napisana anbliskую, ustil nitka chalovka, ze глибокі емоційні thishiju, що повільно переходить у вибух. Абсолютно вбовда правилам YouTube вони фізич. Part 1. She forgot to close the chat window. I forgot how to breathe. The laptop fan was humming. That was the first thing I remember. Low, constant, like a warning you don't realize is a warning until it's far too late. Her screen was still open. I didn't mean to look. I was just going to plug in her charger. That's all. But then I saw the chat. You taste better when you're scared he'll walk in smiling face with horns. She laughed at that. Actually typed. He's like wallpaper. Doesn't even notice when I leave the house in heels and come home barefoot. My hand just hovered there, fingers curled around the charging cord, stuck in place like I'd reached into an electric fence and couldn't pull away. It wasn't the words that broke me. It was the speed of them, the comfort in how she wrote them. Like this wasn't new. Like this wasn't some mistake. Like I was the mistake. The dumb, devoted husband. The dog who sits at the door no matter how many times you forget to feed him. She was still in the shower upstairs. I could hear her humming. I don't even think she knew she was doing it. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't even blink. Instead, I closed the window like it burned my skin, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my socks. Those same gray socks she once made fun of. You look like a grandpa who gave up, she'd said last winter. Guess what? She wasn't wrong. You want to know the worst part? A tiny, quiet part of me was relieved. Relieved that it wasn't all in my head. That the distance wasn't just me being overly sensitive. That the late nights, the sudden yoga obsession, the silence at dinner, there was a reason. A grotesque, humiliating reason, but a reason. For months, I'd been killing myself trying to fix something I didn't break. I watered dead plants. I apologized for her sighs. I waited up just to ask how her day was, and she'd say, "It's late, Lowell." No, sorry, not Lowell anymore. Let's not give him a name. He doesn't deserve a name. Let's just call him the man who vacuumed while she moaned for someone else. She came downstairs 20 minutes later in the towel I bought her for our 6th anniversary. The one she said was too soft to feel real. I watched her pour coffee like nothing happened. She kissed my cheek. I flinched. She didn't notice. Of course she didn't notice. She hadn't noticed in months. Maybe years. I watched the coffee drip. I watched her scroll on her phone. I watched my reflection in the window, barely a silhouette behind her. And then she asked, "Can you take the bins out?" I did. Of course I did. Because that's what wallpaper does. But something cracked. And it wasn't just the mug I dropped on the way out the door. Chi bajathi, shup ya prodovzhivza part 2? Absolutely. Here is part 2 of this highly unique, deeply emotional, and suspenseful story, written in natural paragraph form, slightly longer as requested, with an original tone that remains true to the whiny, broken-hearted narrator. Every line is built for intrigue, slow-burn collapse, and YouTube-safe storytelling. Part 2. She laughed at a message I was never supposed to see, and I still handed her the towel. The garbage bins rolled unevenly on the cracked pavement, wobbling like I did that morning. I stood by the curb for too long, pretending to adjust the lid, just to keep from walking back inside. My fingers gripped the plastic handle until my knuckles turned white, not from anger. I wish it were anger, but from the kind of confusion that sinks into your bones like winter through a broken window. I couldn't figure out if I was the idiot for never checking, or the coward for not saying a word now that I knew. When I finally walked back into the kitchen, she had already finished her coffee and was halfway through putting on mascara. She used the hallway mirror near the door, standing with one foot lifted like she always did, slightly tilting her head as if checking herself from a stranger's angle. I stood behind her. She didn't flinch. I could have been anyone. A neighbor. A ghost. She wouldn't have noticed either way. "I'll be home late," she said, eyes still on her reflection. Court filings. She didn't even bother to lie creatively anymore. I almost respected that. I opened the fridge, grabbed the milk, and poured it into the same chipped mug I'd used since college. She hated that mug. Said it was embarrassing. I guess it's symbolic now. I stared into it for a full minute, wondering if anyone had ever drowned in dairy. Then I asked the dumbest question a man can ask when he already knows the answer. Who's Martin? She blinked, not in surprise, just as part of the act. A momentary pause before the script kicked in. What? Martin D. I said, my voice already cracking in surrender. From the messages, I expected a flinch, a gulp, a stumble, but she just leaned forward, touched up her lipstick, and muttered, You're looking through my things now. Not, it's not what you think. Not I can explain. Just, you're the problem. That was her gift. Always flipping the spotlight. I wasn't looking through your things, I said, softer than I meant to. Your laptop was open. I just saw it. She finally turned to me. Not angry. Not sorry. Just cold. Like someone in customer service who's been yelled at too many times. Well, she said, grabbing her coat. Now you know. She said it like I had asked if it was raining outside. Then, with the audacity only a truly practiced liar could carry, she walked to the laundry room and shouted back, Have you seen my black heels? The ones with the silver buckle. I couldn't speak. I pointed. She grabbed them. On the way back through the kitchen, she stopped, looked me up and down, and said, Lowell, you should really stop wearing that shirt. It clings in all the wrong places. And just like that, she left. Like she hadn't just confirmed to my face that our entire marriage was a simulation with good lighting. Like I hadn't just spent the night folding her towels while she was out tasting someone else's aftershave. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She didn't say, we'll talk later. Just criticism and door clicks. I stood there for what felt like half the day, milk untouched, fingers trembling. Then I walked into the bedroom, sat at the edge of the bed, and stared at her half of the closet. Every shoe perfectly aligned. Every blouse color-coded. That's when it hit me. She had been preparing to leave long before I opened that message. I was never meant to see it because she didn't care if I did. Her exit wasn't some dramatic escape. It was scheduled, quiet, clinical, precise. And me? I'd already been removed from the equation. I wasn't even wallpaper anymore. I was the wall. Shall I continue with part 3? Absolutely. Here is part 3 of the story, written with slightly longer length, in natural paragraph form, keeping the tone highly emotional, utterly unique, and deeply intriguing. No reused structure, no cliches. This part dives even further into the silent unraveling of a man who's finally waking up inside the ruins of his marriage. Part 3. The more I pretended nothing was broken, the more she dismantled me. I didn't go to work that day. I called in and said I had food poisoning, which wasn't technically a lie if you count betrayal as something that turns your stomach into a knotted fist. I just couldn't sit in my gray cubicle pretending to sort land records while imagining her laughing at her phone under some linen restaurant table with a man who called her baby in text messages he never meant to keep secret. Instead, I sat on our beige sofa with Baxter's head resting on my knee, the house painfully quiet. No dishwasher humming. No TV noise. Just me and the dog who kept glancing up at me like he knew something was wrong, but couldn't do a damn thing about it. I kept thinking about her voice, not the words, but the tone. That distant, flat cadence she used when she said, Now you know. That was the sound of someone who had already rehearsed the confrontation in her head and had stopped caring about its outcome. And what was I supposed to do? Confront Martin? Punch someone in a parking lot like a Hallmark husband with a backbone? I didn't even know what he looked like. I imagined him tall, confident, probably the kind of man who knew how to make espresso and wore watches with exposed gears. I thought about calling her, about texting, about begging, about playing the sympathy card. 12 years, Dahlia. Doesn't that mean anything to you? But what would that accomplish? She already knew the answer. I was the only one pretending the game hadn't ended 5 rounds ago. So I did what cowards do when they can't scream. I cleaned. I scrubbed the countertops until my knuckles hurt. I reorganized the spice cabinet she never used. I even rewired the living room speakers just so I could feel useful, productive, like I wasn't quietly hemorrhaging from the inside out. At one point, I found her old birthday cards in the hallway drawer. One from our 3rd year together read, Thank you for being the safest place I've ever known. I nearly threw up. That card was dated 2 months after I'd maxed out my savings to take her to Asheville for a surprise weekend getaway. She spent most of it texting under the covers and saying she had food migraines. I should have known even then that her absence wasn't accidental. Around 6:15, she texted me. Staying at Karis. Long day. Don't wait up. That was it. No heart emoji. No apology. No explanation. Just a text written like a memo to her building's maintenance guy. I stared at it for a full minute before replying. Okay. Be safe. The moment I hit send, I hated myself. Because that's what I'd always been: safe. Not passionate. Not challenging. Just reliable. A seatbelt. A house key. A last name. And somehow, I still wanted her to feel loved. I microwaved leftover meatloaf and couldn't finish it. Baxter barely touched his food either. I think he missed her scent. Or maybe he just didn't want to eat in a house full of ghosts. Later that night, I stood in the bedroom doorway and stared at her side of the bed. Pillows untouched. Perfume still clinging to the sheets like a memory that didn't know it was expired. I lay down fully clothed and whispered into the dark like an idiot. We can still fix this, right? No one answered. But the silence was clearer than anything she'd ever said. And somewhere deep inside me, something was beginning to rot. Would you like me to continue with part 4? Absolutely. Here is part 4 of your deeply emotional, YouTube-compliant story, written in smooth, uninterrupted paragraphs, slightly longer than before, and filled with original tension and slow-burning psychological collapse. This part carefully builds momentum with an atmosphere that is sharp, surreal, and painfully human. Let's continue. Part 4. She left her diary unlocked, but it was my words written between her lines. The next morning was colder than usual. Not outside, but inside me. The kind of chill that seeps into the chest and makes you feel like you're watching your own life through frosted glass. She hadn't come home. She didn't call. Didn't even pretend she owed me a follow-up. That was the part that sat heaviest in my chest, the complete ease with which she discarded accountability. Her coat was still hanging in the hallway. A quiet taunt. Her toothbrush still next to mine. That insult stung the most. She was building her exit in chapters, but hadn't even had the decency to take the prop items with her. As if even her hygiene was entitled to my silence. I wandered into the bedroom and sat on the floor like a man who no longer recognized gravity. I didn't want to move. I just needed something to anchor me, and it wasn't going to be her anymore. That's when I noticed it. Her leather-bound journal. The one with the floral spine. Always locked. Always hidden behind winter scarves she never wore. Only this time, it was out. Slightly cracked open. A pen still wedged between pages like it had been dropped in haste. I hesitated. I wish I could say I didn't. I wish I could lie and tell you I opened it to understand her better, to be the mature, composed man who wanted to save the marriage. But the truth? I opened it because I wanted to bleed. The first page I landed on was dated just a few weeks ago. When Martin touches me, I feel like I exist again. Not like with Lowell, who looks at me like I'm a plant he forgot to water. I paused. Read it twice. And still, the words didn't sink in. I wasn't angry. Not yet. What I felt was worse: agreement. I had looked at her like that. Not because I stopped caring, but because I was tired. Tired of guessing if I was enough. Tired of shrinking myself so she could feel big again. Another entry, 2 pages over. He won't leave unless I give him a reason. I need him to leave first. That way I'm not the villain. I've tried being cruel, distant, but he just keeps loving me through it. That's the problem. He doesn't leave. He waits. She wasn't wrong. God help me. She wasn't wrong. I put the journal down like it was radioactive. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely unscrew the cap of my water bottle. I sat there for an hour staring at the wall, not thinking, just absorbing the new version of her. Not the Dahlia who kissed my forehead when I had the flu. Not the one who called me honey bear in our 2nd year of marriage. No, this was a strategist. A tactician. A woman sculpting her freedom out of my passivity. And me? I had become the obstacle to her escape. Around 11 a.m., I heard her car pull into the driveway. I didn't move. Just sat there like a man pinned beneath a building he helped build. The door creaked open. She hummed again, that same unconscious melody that haunted me now. She called out from the kitchen, "Did you eat something?" Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just slept in another man's bed while I made room in my heart for her apologies. She walked into the hallway and froze when she saw the journal in my hands. Her lips parted. No words came. Just the sound of guilt trying to decide if it was worth performing. "You read it," she said flatly. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Lowell, You don't have to explain," I cut in, my voice so calm it scared even me. "You're right. I don't leave. I wait. But not anymore." Something flickered in her eyes. Not regret. Not pain. Panic. She didn't expect that. She expected tears, maybe begging. A plea to work on this. She expected the wallpaper to apologize for not being more colorful. Instead, I stood up. I handed her the journal. Then I walked into the kitchen and opened a drawer we hadn't touched in months. Inside was the envelope with the name of our couple's therapist from 3 years ago. The one she stopped attending after 3 sessions. I held it up. "You made your decision," I said, "but you don't get to be the only one with a plan." And for the first time in years, I watched her look confused. And for the first time in my life, I didn't offer her a way out. "Would you like me to continue with part 5? "Absolutely. Here's part 5, slightly longer, written in natural paragraph form, staying deeply emotional, quietly devastating, and building on the shifting balance of power. This part takes an unexpected turn, still fully original and YouTube safe, keeping you immersed in Lowell's unraveling world and emotional confrontation with truth. Part 5. She said I was finally acting like a man, but not the one she wanted anymore. She didn't say anything after I held up that envelope. She just stared at it like it was a fire alarm going off in a room full of guests she didn't want to embarrass. Dahlia had always hated mess. Not physical mess. She could handle a sink full of dishes. But emotional chaos? Uncontrolled reactions? That terrified her. She liked her life clean and orchestrated. And now here I was, cracking the shell she built so carefully around herself. She walked past me slowly, like a person stepping through a crime scene she didn't want to admit she caused. She poured herself water, sipped it too quickly, then leaned on the kitchen counter like her knees couldn't decide what to do. "Lowell," she said softly, "we don't have to make this into some spectacle." I looked at her. Really looked at her. For once, I saw past the curated charm and soft tones. I saw a woman who had already written me out of her next chapter, but was surprised I was turning the page before she finished. "A spectacle?" I replied. "No, Dahlia. That's what this marriage has become without anyone watching." She flinched. That was new. For once, my words hit. I could feel it. Her eyes darted. Her breath shifted. She'd expected another retreat, not resistance. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, almost as a reflex. "You didn't want to get caught," I corrected. "There's a difference." She didn't deny it. She didn't even pretend to. Just stood there, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, like she was waiting for a script she hadn't rehearsed. "I was drowning," she whispered. "And I didn't think you'd ever notice." I stared at her, this woman I had cooked for, worried over, bought allergy meds for in the middle of the night. The woman I once held as she cried after her father's funeral, the one who told me she was too afraid to ever feel ordinary. And yet somehow I had become her symbol of suffocation, not because I abused or ignored her, but because I was too still, too constant, too predictable. "You should have said something," I replied. "You could have told me instead of punishing me for being safe." And then she laughed. Not mean, not bitter, just defeated. "I did," she said. 100 times. You never heard me." There it was. That was the twist I hadn't prepared for. Because the truth is, maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. Maybe I had missed the early warnings. Maybe I had fallen asleep at the wheel, convinced that loyalty alone could carry a marriage through boredom, through distance, through years of slow erosion. But infidelity wasn't a correction. It was demolition. And I didn't sign up to live inside a house that only one of us was holding up. "I found the messages," I said, stepping closer, "the photos. I know who Martin is. I know what this has been." Her eyes widened just slightly, enough to confirm she hadn't realized how much I'd seen. Her phone had been backed up to her cloud. Her texts, her camera roll, all accessible from her iPad, which she hadn't touched in months. I didn't want to look. But after reading the journal, I had to. There were hotel confirmations, Venmo payments, selfies taken in places she told me she hated going. I even found a saved audio message where he told her she sounded like a movie he couldn't stop watching. I never made her feel like that. And the worst part? I thought I was being a good man by not needing to. "I was going to tell you," she finally admitted. I didn't want to destroy you." "You already did," I said quietly. "You just dragged it out so I'd help clean up afterward." She sat down at the table, folded her hands, looked 20 years older than she had a week ago. "So what now?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I pulled a small notebook from my coat pocket. It wasn't hers. It was mine. I'd started writing everything down: dates, words, moments. I don't know why. Maybe because when your reality starts slipping, the only way to hold onto it is by documenting the fall. I opened to a page marked with a star. "Do you remember February 9th? I asked. She blinked, shook her head. "You told me you were going to your sister's to help her set up baby furniture. I brought you takeout when you came back. You said you had a migraine." I watched you eat half of it before you passed out on the couch. She nodded, unsure. Well, that same night, your sister posted a photo from Miami. Her face turned pale. That's when I started writing things down, I said. Not to trap you. Just to keep myself sane. For the first time in years, she looked at me like I was someone unfamiliar. Not the man she grew tired of. Not the safety net. But something else. Something she hadn't anticipated. You're changing, she said, almost under her breath. No, I replied. I'm just finally showing up. Would you like me to continue with part 6? Of course. Here is part 6, written longer, in smooth paragraph form, rich with emotional tension, and full of unexpected depth. This part deepens the conflict while staying original and wholly distinct from anything before. It continues to build that slow, heavy unraveling from the perspective of a wounded man trying to stand in the ruins without screaming. Part 6, she said. I was finally awake, but all I felt was cold. She didn't answer right away. I think she was waiting for me to explode, to throw something, to shout that I hated her. But the truth is, I didn't hate her. I envied her. I envied how easily she moved through the world, how she gave herself permission to want more without having to explain why. Meanwhile, I was still stuck in the same shoes I wore in 2011, scared of switching deodorants because the old one still works. I guess you kept the notebook in case I ever tried to deny it, she finally said. No, I replied. I kept it because I couldn't trust my own memory anymore. You made me feel crazy so many times. I needed proof I wasn't imagining it. I could see her eyes twitch, just a little, the guilt creeping back in. She opened her mouth but closed it again. Good. For once, she had no clever answer. I sat down across from her at the table, the same table we bought secondhand after our wedding because we couldn't afford new. I stared at a scratch on the surface, shaped like a crooked Y. She made it during a wine night with friends when someone told her she'd look amazing with bangs. We laughed about that scratch for years. Now it just looked like a fracture that never healed. I've been thinking, I said slowly, about who I've been in this marriage. She looked at me warily. You don't need to blame yourself, I'm not blaming myself, I interrupted. But I've been dull, predictable. I was so focused on not being a burden that I forgot how to have a presence. She said nothing, just stared at me like I'd become something she couldn't read. You say I never heard you, I continued. And maybe I didn't. Maybe I was too busy trying to be your peace to notice you wanted fire. She winced. It was slight, but it was there. I would have given you anything, I said. But you didn't want anything from me anymore. You wanted someone new. Someone exciting. Someone who didn't remind you of your own boredom. She blinked twice. Fast. I leaned back in the chair and folded my arms, not to look tough, but to hold myself together. I'm not here to punish you, Dahlia. I'm here to tell you I'm not going to live like a forgotten object anymore. She slowly exhaled. So what are you saying? I'm saying I'll pack my things tonight. I'm giving you space. But we're not just slipping out of this quietly like it never happened. I want honesty. And I want something else too. Her eyes narrowed. What? I want you to tell him it's over. She scoffed. You can't be serious. I am. If you want to move on, do it clean. If you want me to leave, fine. But I won't be erased while you keep him as your secret comfort. And if I don't, she asked, her tone sharp now. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Then I'll take the journal, the messages, the screenshots, and I'll send them to Martin's wife. She froze. That was the first time she lost her balance in this game. Yes, I said quietly. I know about her too. She dropped her gaze. Her voice shrank. You wouldn't. I never wanted to. I still don't. But I'm not your shield anymore. I'm not your decoy or your excuse. I'm not going to be your prison warden while you hand out keys to someone else. The silence was brutal. And then, without looking up, she whispered, You've changed. No, I said again. I just stopped loving you more than I loved myself. And with that, I stood up, walked to the bedroom, closed the door, not to shut her out, but to finally be alone with my own voice, uninterrupted. I didn't cry that night, but I didn't sleep either. I lay in the dark and listened to the house, every creak, every shift in temperature. It all felt unfamiliar now, like I'd woken up inside someone else's memory, one where I used to matter. And somewhere down the hallway, I knew she was lying awake too for the first time in years, realizing that I was no longer her shadow. I had become the mirror, and the reflection wasn't what she wanted anymore. Shall I continue with part 7? Of course. Here's part 7, longer, rich in tension and emotion, with no column formatting, continuing the story's unique tone. This part deepens the unraveling of their relationship while giving our narrator something he never had before: leverage. The pacing remains slow and purposeful, the intrigue rising with every line, and still nothing like what's come before. Part 7. I left the house, but not quietly this time. I didn't pack like a man who was running. I packed like someone taking inventory of his own disappearance. One drawer at a time. One sweater, one forgotten sock behind the nightstand. One folded piece of paper with her lipstick print on it that I threw straight into the trash. I wasn't angry, not in the loud, cinematic sense. No yelling. No broken mirrors. Just a steady ache that finally stopped pretending it could be fixed. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't offer help or apologies or even empty gestures. She stayed in the living room, silent, watching some crime show with the volume turned up like it could drown out the sound of her husband unbuilding a life. I stayed in the guest room that night. Not because I wanted to be in the house, but because I needed one last look. I needed to feel what it was like to occupy that space knowing I wasn't wanted in it. Every creak of the floorboards, every drip of the bathroom faucet, they all sounded different now. Like a place slowly erasing my name from its walls. The next morning, I stood at the front door for longer than I should have. I stared at the key in my hand. It felt heavy. Not physically, just in meaning. This was the same key I'd copied for her after our third date, saying, "You don't have to use it yet. Just in case." The same key that hung on her side of the rack for 12 years. Now it was mine again. Solely mine. She came into the hallway, barefoot, holding a coffee she didn't offer to share. "You're really going through with this?" she asked. I nodded. "You could at least tell me where you're staying." "I could," I said. "But then you might think this is temporary." She rolled her eyes. "Lowell, don't be dramatic." I stared at her for a second. And I mean really stared. And I realized I didn't know her face anymore. Not the way you know someone you've shared a bed with for over a decade. Her features were familiar, but the warmth was gone. She looked like a painting of someone I used to love. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I'm being real. Maybe for the first time in this marriage." She scoffed and turned back toward the kitchen. That should have been it. That should have been my cue to leave, quietly, with my single suitcase and backpack full of charged regrets. But something stopped me. Something unexpected. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. I set it on the hallway table beside her keys. She looked at it with a curious glance. "What's that?" "You already know," I replied. Her shoulders tightened. Just slightly. She didn't touch it. "You said I never listen," I continued. "Well, I did. I listened to everything you never said. And then I found what you were whispering to someone else." I stepped outside. The cold morning air hit my skin like clarity. "I haven't decided what I'll do with it," I said over my shoulder. "But if you ever tell me I imagined this, I'll remind you." She didn't follow me. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just stood in the doorway, arms crossed, jaw tense, and watched me walk down the steps like she'd been waiting for this moment since the first crack in the foundation. I stayed with an old college friend. The kind of friend you only call when life feels like it's hemorrhaging, and they answer with, "I have beer," and no questions. He didn't ask what happened. Just handed me a blanket and let me collapse on his couch like a broken tent. And that night, as I lay staring at his ceiling, I wondered if I'd finally done the right thing, or just the only thing left. Because sometimes walking away doesn't feel like strength. It just feels like gravity finally letting go. Shall I continue with part 8, the final part? Absolutely. Here is part 8, the final chapter of this deeply emotional and unique story. It's longer, flows naturally, avoids column formatting, and brings closure with a quiet but powerful positive ending. The tone stays reflective and raw, but ends in a place of growth, self-respect, and emotional freedom fully compliant with YouTube's guidelines. Part 8. She finally called me by my name, but it was too late to matter. 3 days passed before she reached out. 3 whole days of silence. No texts, no "Are you okay?" No apologies. Just digital static between two people who once whispered about baby names and matching coffee mugs. I spent those days like a man detoxing from a life that had numbed him into obedience. I walked a lot, cooked with actual flavor, read books without checking the time. My friend said I looked better, like something heavy had been peeled off my back. I think he meant it. On the 4th day, she called. I stared at the screen for the full 20 seconds it rang, just watching her name light up, as if it had any warmth left in it. Eventually, I answered. My voice barely rose above a whisper. "Hey." There was a pause. Then, Her voice, soft, shaken, uncertain. Lowell. It struck me how strange it sounded. I couldn't remember the last time she said my name without sarcasm, or boredom, or that distracted tone people use when they're texting someone more important. I just wanted to talk, she said. Not to fix things. I know I can't. I just wanted you to know I hear you now. I didn't say anything, not out of bitterness, but because I'd waited so long to hear those words, and now that they came, they didn't carry the weight I thought they would. I ruined it, she admitted, and I wish I could say I had a good reason. I don't. You were kind, steady. You always loved me more than I deserved. And I broke it anyway. I closed my eyes, not to cry, but to keep the peace inside from leaking out. Thank you, I said quietly. That means more than you probably think. I just hope you find someone who sees you the way I should have, she added, her voice cracking for the first time. Maybe I will, I said. But right now, I just want to see myself that way. That ended the call. No begging, no promises, no fantasy about reconciliation. Just honesty. Something we never truly mastered together. Weeks passed. I moved into a small apartment over a bookstore. It's drafty, and the hot water makes weird noises, but it's mine. I started writing again. Not just angry notes in a notebook, but thoughts that made sense, stories that belonged to me. And then, one morning, I caught myself laughing at nothing. Not fake laughter. Not polite. Just real, stupid laughter while trying to make pancakes and flipping one straight onto the floor. And that's when I knew I was going to be okay. Not instantly. Not perfectly. But steadily. Because sometimes you don't need closure from the person who broke you. You just need to stop holding the door open for them. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for someone to choose me. I had already chosen myself. The end. Would you like a title and YouTube description for this story?